The September 1st, 2010 meeting of the Ways and Means Committee will now come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Andrews. Mr. Barker. Here. Mr. Bronson. Here. Chairman Daniele.
Here.
Mr. Haney is excused. Mr. Hyder. Here. Mr. McCann. Here. Mr. O'Brien. Here. Dr. Quattro. Here. Mr. Tucciarello. Here. Mr. Yolovich. Here.
Are there any speakers signed up for the public forum this evening?
We have two speakers this evening. The first is Bill Wynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Ways and Means Committee, administration. I'm Bill Wynn. I'm the Executive Director at Cornell Cooperative Extension. You walk by some peaches here tonight that are donated by a member of our board, Marty Shute. And there's also some information. The reason for the peaches is that we've got a local war fair this Saturday, September 4th. And obviously the produce this time of year is abundant, and shoots as well as other farmers. I think I heard somebody mention Bauman's, whatever. They're all over the place, east, west, north, south around here. Not so much north on the lake, but they come from the lake in terms of what the climate provides. And the growing season has been very, very good to us this year. So please enjoy. I've been here for the other committee meetings, so I've known some of you. I've seen some of you take some already. And please don't be bashful about taking a second, because I know Jeff Adair has his eyes on the rest. So the main reason I'm here tonight is to talk about our 2011 budget request that was submitted on July 9th. I've had various meetings with the administration and county legislature committees and Jeff Adair, and we have another one next week scheduled. Just to tell our story a bit. We've asked for an increase this year of about $70,000 to go to our agriculture, 4-H youth development, environment and energy programs, and for facility improvements. We've had ongoing and planned cost-saving initiatives for 2011. Regional cost sharing regarding ag and 4-H programs continue. Continue the development of the Western New York Regional Business Center. Securing low or no-cost staffing alternatives with AmeriCorps and Rochester Works and summer youth employees and college interns. Energy savings as a result of boiler replacements in late 2008. No planned coal increases for the third consecutive year. We're leveraging a collaboration with the Center for Environmental Information, and that's helping us develop our environment and energy program. There will be additional longer-term cost reduction benefits due to ongoing discussions with other extension associations in the region as well. Significant discussion points that I just want to mention, and I'll conclude. For your information, in the RBJ last September was an article about, or earlier this year I should say, about the local ag contributions to the local economy. And Monroe County contributes about $80 to $100 million. So that's part of the rationale for supporting and upgrading our ag delivery mechanisms internally, and the board has stepped up to do that. A similar operational commitment was taken with 4-H, with hiring an issue leaders that we share with Wayne County. The combined effect of upgrading our delivery capacity with these two keystone programs was a budget deficit, however, this year of about $40,000. We would have had a balanced budget otherwise. We're already beginning to see a payoff on these steps, especially with ag and developing with 4-H in several different ways. There's a cautionary note, though, and that's why I'm here tonight, and as well as having these other meetings, is that the long-term sustainability of these staff ads is not tenable without ongoing continued county support and hopefully the increase that we've requested. So we appreciate your careful consideration of the budget as presented, and look forward to seeing you at other meetings coming up during the fall and in the early winter. So thank you for your time, and enjoy the peaches. Thanks.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Tom Gregory.
I had the pleasure of Mr. Yolovich bringing some information to me representing his constituents in regards to their concerns about the windmills off that particular area, and something I had spoken to you about in the, I believe it was Environmental Committee. I obviously favor windmills. Question is asked in this pamphlet that I read is, can anyone explain why we're having these things? And looking at the five actual resolutions, what are they called on the front page of, what do we call those? Not resolutions, but what are they called?
Rezos.
What, I'm sorry, 10-0250. Referrals, thank you.
Yes.
Looking at 5 of the referrals on the first page and 1 referral on the second page, we're looking at problems that occur. We're looking at ways of responding to problems in our community. I can't think of any better way to proactively resolve or respond to problems that have costs in our community than to provide opportunity and resources for the next generations that will provide individuals opportunity to work, have employment, and justify and rationalize their going to college. Most people don't realize that in 1950, a proposal was put forth of building a dam, a hydroelectric project, north of the Legislature State Park. And you can access this information in the U of R Rare Books collection, where they were going to build a hydroelectric dam above the Legislature State Park and have the discharge there about midway in the park. We talk about energy, creating energy, but it was opposed. It was opposed because we want to keep a beautiful scenic park, which obviously none of us can actually argue against, knowing the beauty of Ledgeworth, save one thing. New York State currently is projecting a 25% power deficit by the year 2020. One of the things that was argued in this information that Mr. Yolovich gave me was that we have environmental impact, and referring to a time when we didn't regulate and we didn't have the oversight back in the 1970s as we have today. People also noted the fact that the grid, well, that a lot of this energy isn't usable. 9% of it is lost. I would say that's inaccurate. I would like you to think about the idea of a dam filled with water. If that dam was filled to 100% capacity, you could see the hydroelectric generating capacity. Our power grid is a lot like that. That energy that would be generated by these windmills will sustain the grid and actually enhance the transmissibility of power throughout the entire grid. But I guess in closing, the final point would simply be this. Looking at those 5 resolutions on page 1, referral on page 1, and the 1 referral on page 2, we can go about doing business in Monroe County always dealing with the problems that face our community, or else we can sustain or preserve something or support something that might go a long ways toward developing these human capital, the resources that are really our true resource in this community. I strongly and continue to support wind power along this north shore or the south shore of Lake Ontario. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. You have the minutes from July 28th, 2010, joint meeting of the Ways and Means and Recreation and Education Committees in your folder. They will stand approved unless the clerk is notified of any changes by the end of the day today. Next, we've asked Dave D'Amelio, who is the director of the Rochester International Airport, to come in and give us a quick update on the incident at the airport last week. Mr. D'Amelio.
Note for the record, Scott Adair actually did something funny.
Noted.
Come on, that was funny, Tad. Come on. Hi, everybody. Last week there was an explosion out at the airport. I read about it in the paper, so I know it's true. The incident is still under investigation at this time. All tanks have been removed. All hydrogen tanks at this time are removed from our facility. We're working with certainly DES, GM to see when we're going to bring everything back and get it set up again. I will comment on a couple things about the incident. There was a really done fantastic job, certainly by Airport Fire, our Fire Chief Todd Bain, a great job by the County Fire Bureau, led by Mr. Bowman and Sam DeRosa, but every agency that responded, and there were a lot. Whenever we have an alert, 2 or 3, or an event of this magnitude, we start closing down roads and everything. It was a group effort with the Rochester Police Department, New York State Police, certainly our Sheriff's Office, and Rochester Fire Department. From the initial explosion to a command post being set up on scene, it was done within 15 minutes, which is, when you think about closing down 2 major roads and the expressways around the airport, all that was done in a 15-minute period. They contained the incident, which, again, I still say is under investigation. One individual was hurt. It was a driver that sustained second-degree burns on his hands and face, but is recovering well. Impacted the airport's operation after a couple minutes into it, talking with the FAA. I did order that the airport be closed down for 50 minutes so we can clear some smoke, make sure that we had the tanks under control. We evacuated part of the terminal, which was more or less in the same wind flow as where we were. We wanted to make sure that the winds were under control. Our secondary runway is about 1,300 feet. The approach of it is about 1,300 feet from where the explosion took place. So with all those things considered, we did shut down for a while, but we're able to get back up and running. We took some delays, took some diversions to Buffalo, but everyone was safe on our property, and certainly Monroe County, and that's our first priority. If anybody's got any questions, I'll make up some answers if you want. Okay.
Legislator O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming and reporting to us today, Mr. DeVilio. I understand from media reports that the refueling stations will be reopened with respect to other kinds of fuels that are available there. Is it your intention and your hope that we will return to the hydrogen as well, or is that something that a decision that will be postponed for now and determined once we know what the cause was?
Through the chair, I would tell you this: the rest of our fueling operation, which everything is done within a couple hundred feet of this incident, with the exception of jet fuel. We have diesel, E85, avgas, regular gas. All is stored and pumped from that facility, and they were all up and running within a few hours after the incident. So we did maintain the integrity of our fuel farm. Everything was shut down while the incident was going down. We did shut, but we had those up and running, and airport vehicles were fueling overnight at that facility. As far as the hydrogen goes, at this time we've postponed any determination. I think once the investigation pans out, we find a direct cause and see what we're going to do from what our next step would be.
Thank you, Mr. D'Amelio. At this time, we have a short presentation from Mr. Ken Dion and Ms. Barb Loveland from KPMG.
Hey, long cat. I'm spectacular. Oh, man, look at these two accounts. They're going to rip road.
Good evening. I'll formally introduce myself. I am Ken Dion. I'm the engagement partner with KPMG on the audit of Monroe County. With me to my right is Barb Loveland. Barb serves as the engagement manager on the audit for the county. What I'm going to do is I'll spend the next couple of minutes walking through with you what KPMG's responsibilities are in performing an audit of Monroe County. I'll give you a status update of some of the deliverables, and then I will walk through what we refer to as our required audit communications to those in charge of governance. So I guess to begin with, our responsibility is really to express an opinion on the financial statements that are prepared by management, and we want to ensure that those financial statements are prepared fairly and conform with U.S. generally accepted accounting principles. We perform the audit, we follow our professional standards, which are issued by the American Institute of CPAs, or the AICPA, and we follow government auditing standards. Now, we plan and we perform the audit to obtain reasonable but not absolute assurance that the financial statements are free of material misstatement, whether caused by error or by fraud. And when I say reasonable assurance, I can't give you absolute assurance. The only way I could do that is if I came to the county and audited every transaction throughout, and I would essentially be here throughout the year, and I'm sure nobody wants to see the auditor here 365 days a year. We don't have any responsibility for detecting non-material errors in the financial statements, but I'll tell you that we spend a lot of time in focusing on internal control over financial reporting. We really consider that in designing our audit procedures and our audit test. However, we don't render an opinion on internal control as if you were a public company we would be required to under the PCAOB standards. We do have a responsibility to communicate to the county legislature any significant matters related to the financial statement audit. And I'm here to report that we did not identify any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in the county's internal controls, or actually any material compliance findings as it relates to the county's financial statements. Now, with respect to some of the deliverables that we have, we issued an unqualified opinion on the financial statements, which is a clean opinion or the best opinion that the county can receive. We also issued we refer to as a yellow book report. That is a report on internal control and compliance at the financial statement level. Within that report, I would be required to report any, again, significant deficiencies, material weaknesses, or material compliance findings. We did not identify any. With respect to the single audit, the federal compliance audit, we're in the process of completing that audit. There is a deadline with the federal deadline of September 30th. We don't see any issue at all with finishing the audit and meeting that deadline. One of the other deliverables, we will be issuing we call a SAS 114 letter, a letter that communicates our required communications to those in charge with governments. So I guess, with respect to the audit itself this year, I'll give you a little bit of a highlight there. The significant accounting policies, which are described in Note 1 to the financial statements, we really spend a lot of time looking at those accounting policies to make sure that, one, they conform with U.S. generally accepted accounting principles, and that they are consistent with the previous year. In both instances, we found that they were consistent and they were compliant. We did not identify any unusual transactions in performing the 2009 financial statement audit. One thing is, looking at the financial statements, embedded in those financial statements are we refer to as management's judgments and estimates in preparing and recording assets and recognizing liabilities. A few of those significant estimates are the reserve for uncollectible property taxes, the workers' compensation liability, the post-employment benefit liability, which is significant, and the pollution remediation liability. Within there's estimates and methodologies that essentially we have to basically bring in our experts in those fields, like an actuary or evaluation specialist, to work with the team in order to make sure that those estimates are reasonable and accurate and in conformity with generally accepted accounting principles. I'm here to report that they were. Audit adjustments, there were no any audit adjustments recorded in the financial statements, both material or non-material, in the 2009 financial statement audit. There were two minor audit differences that were identified by us that were not material and not recorded or reported within the financial statements. Those audit differences are included on a schedule which is attached to the management's representation letter. There were no disagreements with management. In fact, as in the past, we received their full cooperation, excellent cooperation in performing the audit. We were not aware that management was opinion shopping during the course of the audit. As I said, there were no real difficulties at all encountered in performing the audit this year, the financial statement or a single audit. In terms of independence, which is very important, obviously, to KPMG, I'm here to report that we did not perform any services outside the audit and I'm here to report now verbally, and will be included in the SAS 114 letter, that KPMG is independent of the county with respect to the audit of the financial statements. And as I previously noted, we will confirm that in a formal letter that we'll be issuing when we issue the single audit report. With that, it's very brief. I can open it up for any questions that anybody may have.
Legislator Barker.
Thank you. Through the chair, the county's received a large amount of federal stimulus money in the past year. Did you review that and make sure that we're complying with all of the things that we need to?
Well, yeah, you received under the ERA funding. It really has changed a lot of what we have to do as auditors. We have to essentially, the biggest change is that if you receive say ERA funds under a program, that prior to this year, prior to receiving the ERA funds, we probably would not have audited that program because it was, one, not material, or it was considered low risk in accordance with the rules that we follow. Now that you receive the money, we are required to audit it. So any ERA funds that you receive that come in, they go out, we're required to audit it as auditors and report on it. And we had essentially, in auditing those ERA funds, we did have to expand our audit procedures in certain areas like the reporting, they call 1512 reporting, cash management, allowability, Buy America. We have to make sure that any federal funds used to buy certain things under construction, really anything, has to be made essentially in America. So, you were in compliance, absolutely.
Thank you.
Legislator Andrews.
Thank you for coming this evening for your presentation. Following up on Legislator Barker's question regarding the ERA funding, it seems from reviewing the financial statements and my limited understanding about them that without certainly the ERA funding in 2009, that the general fund balance, which was positive, would in fact have showed a significant deficit. Mm-hmm. And likewise, the unreserved, unrestricted general fund balance, which showed a $3 million deficit, would have been in the $30+ million range. Can you comment on that, or what does that really spell for the future if without this funding, which is certainly, in essence, sort of a one-shot?
Well, I can tell you, probably let Scott talk a little bit more about the financial statements, but from my perspective, I mean, you're not alone. If you look at all the governments, it's you're very, very consistent with governments your size. And I think, again, as we work through this economy, and hopefully the economy really will turn around, I would hope that you'll see that in the services that you provide, and obviously in the revenue sources that the property taxes and other taxes and state funding. Clearly, you are connected to the state. The state's at and I can't remember the number, $3 billion. It's probably bigger than that. I just can't off the top of my head. A very large deficit. And once again they work through that, and the economy turns, I would hope that things would turn around. But from a auditor's point of view, when we look at a fund deficit, one thing that we're concerned with is going concern. Is the entity going to be in business in a year? That's what our responsibility is. Obviously, the county is not going to go bankrupt, and it's going to be in business 1 year from today.
And so then, in your opinion, for how many years can a county show fund deficits without having any concern?
I think that the question's inappropriate. The question has nothing to do with the fundamental report that we just heard with regards to what's required to be reported. So if we would, Mr. Chairman, through you, why don't we just stick to reasonable questions for our auditors with regards to the report as opposed to asking questions about the future?
Mr. Chairman, I just asked for his opinion.
Because
he was
it's inappropriate.
Expressing an opinion earlier, and I was following up on Legislator Barker's question regarding the ERA funding, which is...
Yeah, I mean, if we could just keep the questions
And through the
towards-
chair, Legislator Barker's question, I don't mean to question or to speak for him, was about the fundamentals with regards to the county's reporting with regards to the ERA funding, not about prognostications for the future with regards to the state's budget or the county's budget. So just to be clear, let's just stick to the fundamentals of the report.
Legislator Quattro, I didn't ask anything about this state's deficit or state's budget. I just simply asked a question regarding from an auditor's perspective, if you wouldn't mind sharing with me or commenting on for how long do you consider it acceptable, I guess, to have fund deficits.
I think he answered that if, their job as an auditor is to make sure that we are going to be okay for past year and the year coming forward. Am I correct?
Yes.
And that they're not really auditing 3-4 years down the road necessarily at this point.
I can say, though, there is, if you look at the Government Finance Officers Association, GFOA, some of the document information and that they have, thought leadership probably would address something like that for typical governments, but I really don't know that answer.
Thank you. That's helpful. That's all.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Thank you both, and
Sure.
we'll look forward to the final report, and
Thank
I'm
you.
sure we'll have a chance to ask questions at that point.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is new business. Would the clerk please read first item?
Referral 10-249, acceptance of
Moved by
grant.
Legislator Yolovich, seconded by Legislator Barker. Are there any questions? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 10-250, acceptance
Moved by
of grant.
Legislator Barker, seconded by Legislator McCann. Are there any questions? Legislator O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I note, this referral calls for the county executive to accept a $1.18 million grant, and the referral also details how much is going into the district attorney's fund center and how much into the sheriff and how much the Office of Probation. And under the action items, we talk about amending the operating budgets of the Office of the Sheriff and of the Department of Public Safety, but not of the district attorney's office. And I guess I just wanted to understand, was the majority of these grants already in the 2010 budget, and these now we're just kind of adjusting it for final program reasons, or what would be the reason for amending some of the operating budgets, and how is the money actually dispersed? If you could understand my question through you, Mr. Chairman.
Through the chair, this amount is a 12% cut from last year, and there was some amounts that were budgeted in the 2010 budget in the operating budgets of those three departments, but based on what was actually will be received, probation and the sheriff's office need to amend their budgets to add funding, and the district attorney's office needs to return some of the funding, reduce some of the funding levels that were budgeted for 2010.
I see. Okay. Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, action item 4 talks about the county executive or her designee being authorized to execute contracts to carry out the purposes of the grant. Would the designee likely be the district attorney if it's a district attorney's office matter? Would it be the sheriff if it was a sheriff's matter, and so on? Or what kind of contracts are anticipated with that particular action item?
Through the chair, it would be the individuals involved in those specific departments who would be initiating those contracts.
Okay, so really what we're authorizing now as a legislature is for the administration to execute contracts which would be carried out by the various personnel in each individual department, is just so I get a sense of what kind of contracts I guess we're talking about.
Through the chair, that's correct. The individual departments will execute the contracts to carry out the purposes of the grant that was put into their grant proposal.
Right, and then as, I guess, a final question, so by passing this referral, ordinarily, I guess, if the administration is going to enter into contracts over $5,000, we'll come back to the legislature, but we're basically granting authority to execute contracts that would be in furtherance of the grant programs that these funds. Is that a correct statement, essentially?
Through the chair, that's correct.
I have nothing further.
Thank you, Legislator. Are there any other questions on this referral? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 10-251, authorizing.
Moved by Legislator McCann, seconded by Legislator Quattro. Is there any discussion? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 10-252.
Moved by legislator Quattro, seconded by legislator Tucciarello. Any discussion? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Item carries.
Referral 10-253.
Moved by legislator Tucciarello, seconded by legislator Yolovich. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Item carries.
Referral 10-254.
Moved by legislator Yolovich, seconded by legislator Barker. Is there any discussion? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Item carries.
Referral 10-255.
Moved by legislator Barker, seconded by legislator McCann. Any discussion? Legislator O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, how many individuals are served locally by the WIC program?
Through the chair, approximately 10,000 individuals through our WIC program.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Item carries.
Referral 10-256.
Moved by legislator McCann, seconded by legislator Quattro. Is there any discussion? Being none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Item carries.
Referral 10-259.
Moved by legislator Quattro, seconded by legislator Tucciarello. Legislator Andrews.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through to the administration. I'd like to know if there's any data yet available on recidivism rates for parolees who participate in this program versus parolees who do
not. Through the chair, Bob Burns, probation administrator. New York State DCJS is compiling the data, and at some point will issue reports with regard to recidivism rates. We only know our local data, and that's in the area of between 11 and 20% return rate of parolees returning to our community. That compares with 50, 60, or 70% that were returning just a few years ago.
Thank you very much.
Any other discussion? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Item carries.
Referral 10-260.
Moved by legislator Tucciarello, seconded by legislator Yolovich. Any discussion? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Item carries.
Referral 10-262.
Moved by legislator Yolovich, seconded by legislator Barker. Any discussion? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Item carries.
Referral 10-263.
Moved by legislator Barker, seconded by legislator McCann. Is there any discussion on this issue? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Are there any other matters to come before this committee this evening? There being no further business, the September 1st, 2010 meeting of the Ways and Means Committee stands adjourned. The next meeting is scheduled for September 29th at 6 p.m. Thank you.